Rain is the same for everybody. As Miller comes, it will be the best time. Miller, number 1.
Oh, Ulrich's gone down.
Ulrich is out. And he was in the lead by about 6 seconds when he fell. But Armstrong comes home. It looks like a third place finish, and he knows it's nothing. He's won the Tour de France.
Hello, the Tour TARDIS touched down in Nantes this morning and we stepped out to find ourselves in 2003. Rain's not actually mentioned in the tourist board's list of local specialities, but they've kindly laid some on for us anyway. Perhaps out of nostalgia for the Centenary Tour, which pretty much concluded here when Jan Ullrich went over in the wet in the final time trial and Lance Armstrong secured his 5th and easily most exciting Tour win. Now today is another chance for Mark Cavendish. In fact, weather permitting, it's actually better than yesterday because it's a proper flat sprinter stage, and should he get it, it'll complete a UK double because the stage winner here in 2003 was David Miller, although that David Miller and the one on this year's race are radically different people. Since his 2-year ban for drugs, he's become the poster boy and virtual press officer for the anti-doping movement, and he's here this year as team leader and part owner of a squad that's in the vanguard of cycling's new transparency. Here's Ned Bolting on the life and tour times of David Miller.
Miller comes up to the line. He's got the target. Miller has set down the best time.
Premier leader du Tour de France, David Miller.
And now the big question is, what are you going to do to defend it?
I'm not going to do anything. My team's going to do it all. They can sit on the front and ride in the wind. I'm going to be sitting back there profiting.
So much has happened to David Miller since he first burst onto the scene that it takes some digesting.
I'm maturing into something else. I don't really know what that is yet, but I'm enjoying what I do. I love what I do.
Part of his thing is being the self-styled philosopher king of the peloton. Articulate, sought after, outspoken and honest. A world apart from the maverick, occasionally precious figure of 2003. David, just quickly, how much did you suffer out there today?
Oh, I don't think you don't want. Just the right words. My vocabulary isn't sufficient.
He won in the rain in Nantes, but the following year brought meltdown. His ban for EPO use left him stunned.
I think having those 2 years away from the sport kind of had changed everything for me. I came back a different rider, a different person. I'd lost a lot. I think of my physical capabilities in those 2 years. When you take 2 years away, it's going to take a big chunk out of you. And psychologically, I lost a lot of the confidence. I mean, this Tour de France was going to be exactly 2 years since I came back. So it's going to be 2 years away and 2 years back when I start this tour. So I'd like to think that I can finally kind of wipe out those 2 years away regards the loss physically. But what I lost physically, I think I've gained mentally. I mean, I'm stronger. I have an ability to work harder and more consistently than I ever had when I was younger. And I don't know, I mean, I love it more than I ever did before. So, I mean, it's kind of, it was a blessing in a disguise, I think.
It's been a struggle. This is only his second tour since returning. Reborn now in the white of a team he jointly owns.
We want to make a difference, and I think that's what, and we want to kind of enjoy the sport again and kind of let the people who love the sport have something to believe in, and that's kind of the core reasons behind our team.
Last year, by his own admission, his form was uncertain. This year, he's brimming with aspiration, even if familiar misfortunes still haunt him. At the Giro, for example, he broke a chain.
What already is a very rare occurrence, a chain snapping, but having it happen at the most definitive moment in a 203-kilometre race, when the kilometre to go kite is literally touchable, was just, I don't know, kind of made me a bit angry.
Stuff like that happens to him. Just another in a long line of strange, high-profile mechanical mishaps, from the jumping chain of the 2003 prologue to last year's exploding rims.
2 of my Mavic discs explode in the first 500 metres. Car wasn't nearby, so and then I didn't give up. I went as hard as I could to the first time check, and I'd said in my head, if I'm at a minute or under, I'll keep on going, but if I'm over a minute, I'm just shutting it down.
I don't know whether I'm just cursed or it just happens to me at the most inopportune times, because I think everybody has these mechanical problems. I just tend to have them when they're at the most visible to the world. The Tour, I have a very kind of, I keep a place in my heart for Tour de France. It's the reason I do it all. It's the kind of, and I have a very close relationship with the organisers and with the ex-director Jean-Marie Leblanc and now the current director Christian Prudhomme. And I do feel that it's kind of family there. I love the race, and it's something that I just love being part of. And if I can kind of be at 100%, then if I win, I don't mind, as long as I can be part of the race.
Interesting and articulate as ever, David Miller, and there's his family this morning, setting off for a day's ride through the Breton countryside. After yesterday's detour to Saint-Brieuc, the race off south in earnest now. Let's take a look at stage 3, 208 kilometres from Saint-Malo down to Nantes, roughly Edinburgh to Aberdeen if you want a handy reference. 362 kilometres of the 3,559 race so far. And unlike the rolling terrain of the first 2 days, almost nothing on today's profile except wind, rain and 3 intermediate sprints. And there was plenty of both, wind and rain that is. Another day for the Caisse d'Épargne Diplomatic Protection Unit to shelter their man in yellow. Alejandro Valverde leads the race from a bunch of his rivals, starting with Kim Kirchen. Cadel Evans is 5th and David Miller 7th, all of them just a second off the lead themselves. The same goes for Frank Schleck, and then the gaps start to appear. His brother Andy is 7 seconds back in 17th, Denis Menchov 25th, 2 places ahead of Carlos Sastre. Mark Cavendish is 2 minutes down, but he's here for stage wins, not the overall classification. Mauricio Soler may not be here for much longer, injured after his stage 1 crash, and last man in the race, 10 minutes 22 behind the leader. Now, Fabian Wegmann was the first man to touch the tarmac today. He went down after a touch of wheels in the bunch. With the rain heavy but intermittent, Martin Maskant brought himself to a halt by getting his rain jacket caught in his back wheel. Not the kind of move to garner much sympathy from the team car. Andy Schleck had some running repairs to his cleats at the back of the race, but as ever, the back of the race was not the place to be if you wanted to avoid hold-ups. Breton villages are picturesque, but their roads are not designed for heavy traffic. Now, as we've seen on stages 1 and 2, the French riders have been getting their faces out front, as have the French public. This pair mesmerised by their close-up moment and completely missing the day's breakaway flying by. In there were a pair of Frenchmen, Romain Fellou and Samuel Dumoulin, along with an Italian, Paolo Longoborghini, and William Frischkorn of the USA. They built a lead of 15 minutes at one point, but as we pick it up with 56 kilometres left to race, that's been pulled back to under 7 minutes as the bunch begins to take an interest.
There is Kim Kirchen has moved up. He's 2nd overall in the race, as well as leader of the green jersey. And Valverde talking to his teammates. They've gone into the sort of wooded section again, but you can see by the leaves there just how strong the wind is blowing today. And don't forget now, we've nearly been in the saddle for 4 hours, so legs are beginning to get tired.
I think, Phil, looks like there's going to be a manifestation here, a strike on the side of the road, and I think this is there's the organiser of the Tour de France, Christian Prudhomme, is saying, right, for the moment, please don't stop the riders. Your protest has been heard, it's been put across, but do not stop the Tour de France. Allow the riders to go through, because they've got a job to do as well. Now then, here come the 4 leaders. I think they're going to get through. It won't cost them a lot of time. 6:54 as they get into the problem. And a round of applause for the riders. They've gone through anyway, so I think the day was won there with a little bit of diplomacy from Christian Prudhomme, the race director of the Tour de France, who made sure television cameras put their point of view across, and then they stepped aside. The race is through. 6:56 has gone up 2 seconds. I don't think that could be right, but still. I have to say that was very quick thinking by Christian Prudhomme to get in there with the television cameras. The protesters got their message across, and they pretty much allowed the Tour de France to continue. Those guys were slowed down, but at least they weren't stopped, and we've seen that in the past where the race has been stopped because of protests. As we try to get back to the action here, gently now, a helicopter clearly is back up, so looking down on the leaders of the peloton, the echelon definitely forming at the front now, and a lot of anxious riders trying to keep their position at the front and not lose position. Any moment, a change of wind direction now will split the field, I'm sure of that. Seems to have lost a little bit of impetus for the moment at 55 kilometres to go, inside of 7 minutes. And this is what it's like at the back end of the main field when the rain starts to come down. It's put on the raincoats, take off the raincoats, put on the raincoats, take off the raincoats, and it's going to be one of those days. That rider at the back there was John Gadret. He's a rider who I would expect to see come to the front of the Tour de France once we come into the mountains. But again, Phil, it really is unpredictable, the weather. Well, it is, and I must say that the only good news about the rain here, it doesn't seem to last very long before it actually
goes off again, but when it comes, it is really heavy, isn't it?
It is terrible. It's just one of those days when it's raincoats on and off and on and off for the whole day. It makes it a little bit dangerous at the back because you've got riders moving up and down to the team cars. There's a lot of traffic at the back end of the main field, going to get gloves, going to get dry hats, going to get raincoats, and then taking them off again. And bit of chaos for the domestiques on a day like this.
Yes, and once the pressure goes on, it's very difficult to do anything at all except just leave on what you've just put on and sweat it out, because sometimes there's no time to take it off. John Gadway then, he rode his first Tour de France last year, finished 54th. Big hopes actually that he will eventually ride a great Tour de France as we go through on the Forêt de Malal du Gavre.
Yeah, it's a state forest that we're looking at here, Phil. It's 11,500 acres, and originally it was owned by the Dukes of Brittany way back in the 13th century. And the amazing thing about France is that France has seriously managed to preserve a lot of its forested areas.
Well, it's a beautiful forest indeed. It is extremely dense here, and many of the trees are up to 100 years old apparently. There'll be deciduous and hardwood trees here, and dead straight through the forest as well. They hacked their way through that one, didn't they? This is Thomas Voigtler here. He's had 2 really good days of attacking cycling. It's given him that lead in the King of the Mountains. Day off for him today, no points at all available, so he'll be on the podium later. And now he's moved from the back. Remember, for 2 or 3 hours he sat at the back of the peloton. He sensed, and he's a very clever rider, he sensed that things were changing, so he's put himself right to the front just in case things go awry in the next half an hour or so.
Yes, a clever rider. In fact, he's a rider who I think is just reaching a certain amount of maturity now. You know, when he got the lead in the Tour de France, so that was back in 2004, he was only 24 years of age, but he showed his guts and courage on that occasion by battling to keep himself in the lead. And one day, I remember in the mountains, when Lance Armstrong was trying to take back the lead, he was dropped on about 7 different occasions and battled his way back into the main field and held on to the yellow jersey. And he earned the respect not only of the French public but also of Lance Armstrong at the time, who congratulated him for his courage and tenacity. And that same year he actually finished 20th in the Olympic road race, and that was in Athens. So just looking down at the main field, the gap now seems to have stabilized out a fraction, and it's been locked in at around about the 7-minute mark, and I'm a little bit surprised at that, but maybe it's just the lull before the storm as the riders continue to make their way through this forest. And the weather, just look at that. At the finish line here, it is absolutely dry. It's a dry road surface, but just 30 miles away, these riders are being subjected to this incredible cloudburst once again. Liquigas. Now, this is the back end of the field. There's a couple of riders from Team Garmin Chipotle there. They're pretty happy with their day here this afternoon because, of course, they know that they've got a man in the breakaway, and Team Garmin Chipotle. This is the point where the protesters were just a little while back, and they've moved back off the road. They made their protest. They slowed the race down a fraction, and now they've allowed everybody else to get it back up and continue with the tour without too much of a hazard.
And welcome back to our coverage here on ITV4 of the Tour de France. Well, today we're heading down south to Nantes, the last stage in Brittany. This, by the way, was one of the original towns on the first route in 1903, before the riders rode all the way to Paris from Nantes. Well, the first email we have to answer today comes from Una and Peter Moores, and they ask, who is your favourite to win the Tour this year? Well, my favourite always has been, he's been training very hard all season, the Australian Cadel Evans, who finished second last year, and without Contador here, I think he must have a chance. Who about you, Paul?
I think I'd have to go for Alejandro Valverde, who's looked pretty good since the start, and I think his time trialling ability has improved as well, so he's the man to watch, I think.
Well, he set himself a tough target to try and lead this race from day one, that's for sure. We're going on then, let's have a look at Len Minette from Norfolk. Who is the oldest rider in this year's race, and who is the oldest rider to win the Tour?
Well, I'll take the easier question, because I think the oldest rider in the race is Stefan Goubert. He's 38 years old and a few months. But don't forget, today happens to be Eric Zabel's birthday, and he's 38 too.
And he once won it in Charleroi in Belgium on his birthday, so maybe he'll win today. He is a sprinter after all. Well, the oldest rider to win the Tour de France, that happened in 1922, and his name was Firmin Lambeau, and he was 36 years of age. But we have had a number of winners at 34, not least, of course, the last one, Lance Armstrong won at 34 years of age. Gino Bartoli of Italy. We've also had Joop Zoetemelk, that was in 1980, and another rider who won was Lucien Buisse, a Belgian rider who did that in 1926. All right, let's move on then. Arthur Brown from Shrewsbury. I have seen the French and German national champions jersey in the peloton, but where is the British one? Well, I guess the simple answer is, Paul, that the British champion isn't riding the Tour de France, but he won his title on the 29th of June, and we can now go to Matt Rendell to tell us more on that.
Duncan Park in North Yorkshire was the setting, and 204 rolling Yorkshire kilometres the route for 150 of Britain's best riders, amateur and professional, national and international, including Mark Cavendish and David Miller. The early lead taken by Ian Wilkinson of Science in Sport ahead of a small chasing group. Back in the peloton, a twitchy Cavendish next to teammate Roger Hammond, with David Miller nearby. Several changes of lead in the first half of the race before it settled down into a pattern. A breakaway group of 12 men with some big British-based riders: Dan Lloyd, Dean Downing, Tom Southam, Rob Hales, but no Miller or Cavendish. The group worked well, holding off long pulls by David Miller at the head of the peloton, and into the closing stages, that leading group began to splinter. The weather was always going to play a part, and as the finish line crowds waited, the rain came down. Rob Hales didn't care. The 3-times world champion appeared alone and added the British Championship to his long list of titles at the age of 35.
Well, plenty of national champions represented on the Tour, as we've heard, although none of them in the 4-man group have chanced their legs today in the hope of staying away to the finish. Their chances are looking better with every passing kilometre.
5:25 the gap, Paul. Were so good at expertise that we said it was a day for the sprinters, and I think the bunch thought the same, but it's all going a little bit awry, isn't it?
It is all going a little bit awry. You see just in the distance there's the bridge of Saint-Nazaire. I think what has happened here today, Phil, is the main field have underestimated the power of the breakaway. They obviously, many of the riders in the main field, they didn't know Will Friscorn, they didn't know Paolo Longo Borghini all that much, and didn't realise the power that those guys had. They did get a little bit of panic when the gap got to 15 minutes. They chased them for a long time and halved that advantage. Then all of a sudden, I think the men in the leading group of 4 have become invigorated by the fact that they've been told that there is a tailwind finish, and if they can just get to that corner where they swing around and start to line up for Nantes, they'll pick up the tailwind and they will probably survive the day this afternoon. That's why we have breakaways. That's why the guys go out. People always say to, why do these guys go in the breakaway and get caught down towards the end? Well, the reason they do it is for just this reason we're looking at right now, because one day or 2 days or 3 days during the Tour de France, the breakaway survives, and that's what you dream about.
There's the estuary of the Loire, where France's longest river goes out into the Atlantic Ocean. Well, the river may be going out, but I'm just wondering if the sprinters are going out as well. It's a beautiful estuary, isn't it, Paul?
It is. It comes at the end of a river, which, as you said, is the longest river in France, 1,020 kilometres. As we look down at the front end of the main field, it's a tough call for the sprinters, and this is when it starts to become rather tactical, because the teams of the guys who want to win the bike race overall don't want to waste too much energy, because you know, the amount of energy you've got in your body is a little bit like the amount of money you've got in your bank account, and you can only spend that energy over a 3-week period. If you spend it all in the first week of the Tour de France, then you're completely bankrupt in the last week, and that's when we see people hitting the wall. The teams of the sprinters, they have to take advantage of spending as much money as possible in the first week of the Tour, because that's when their guys have the chances of winning the stages. What they're trying to do now is each rider from the teams of the sprinters comes to the front and sets the pace for a short while, lifting up the average speed of all of the guys who are following them in the slipstream. That's the theory, but sometimes they get it wrong.
There's the famous TGV that runs through France, the Train Grande Vitesse. Boy, that goes like an arrow across the countryside, and is very rarely late, by the way. It's a great way of travelling here in France. There is the main pack. The sprinters teams are in a little bit of a state of panic now. They've got to ride awfully quickly to pull back 5 minutes in 15 miles.
There's another crash. A crash there, you can see, just at the back end of the main field.
Well, this is always on the cards. They have hit the centre. It's not Rico, because he's got a white jersey on for Sonia Duval. But that, what has happened here on the split.
That's sad news for Angel Gomez.
Angel Gomez is looking rather seriously injured here as he clipped the centre of that reservation. A big shock. Now that also is going to disrupt the chase here.
Yeah, that is Nicky Sorensen down there, the champion of Denmark.
Yeah, the Danish champion definitely. Gomez is on the floor here, most injured.
Yeah, you recognise the Danish national champion. He's got the red jersey with the white cross across it. It's a little bit confusing because it also looks like the Norwegian national champion jersey. Exactly. And both of those riders ride for the team CSC. And just looking down there at Sorensen, he's up and walking, and I think he'll be back on his bike very shortly. But that doesn't seem to be the situation, Phil, for Angel Gomez, who's down with Dr. Gerard Porte. Big Hincapie coming up to the front here. He's thinking about his man Mark Cavendish, but I still feel, Phil, that they've left it a little bit too late today, because in about 5 kilometers time they're going to swing around to line up in an easterly direction, and they'll pick up the wind. And
look at the split, Paul. Look at the split at the back.
That's being created by the crash.
But they are driving now. They will not be coming back to this group. This is Juan Manuel Garate on the right too. Boy, there's desperation on the faces of Quick-Step here, because their man Gert Stegmans, now there's the split, albeit caused by the crash, but at 20 kilometers we pick up the tailwind, and these boys are going to have a fight for their lives now. And at this moment, of course, we don't know who has been left in that last peloton. There could be some big names down there. There's certainly Case de Pon riders.
Well, this is the confusing part now when the race splits like this, because you have to look down the overall classification and see which guys have missed out on that split, who was at the back end of the main field at the wrong time. Because of that crash, because of these splits, you could find yourself losing 15 minutes on the first flat stage like this.
The gap is still 4:31, 20 kilometers coming up.
Yeah, look at that wind, though. The wind is battering on the back end of these riders. There's Stefan de Jong in the middle for Quick-Step, just getting as much air in as possible. He realizes this is a hard time of the race. I haven't seen the yellow jersey, but I'm pretty certain there he is, riding nice and comfortably. You don't catch Alejandro Valverde out, because he's been riding in the front 15, 20 places all of the time. And for what reason? For just the reason we witnessed a few moments ago, the race splitting up at the drop of a hat.
He sacrificed a couple of his teammates, but there's some more still here. One's guiding him, so always looking over his shoulder, making sure Alejandro is with him, guiding him through and getting him safe at the front.
Another name that's crackling through on race radio who's missed this front split is Denny Menchov, a man who rides for Team Rabobank and a great contender for the overall classification too. So once again, on a mundane flat stage, stage 3, the day before the time trial, we could see serious time gaps appearing.
And these four boys don't really know what's going on behind them, except they're still holding on at 20 kilometers to go, 4 minutes and 26 seconds. So in that crash now, we are receiving confirmation that Denny Menchov, the big favourite on Rabobank, has been delayed by the crash. We don't think he was involved in it, but he's going to lose time now that could cost him the Tour.
And of course, the man who leads the white jersey competition involved in that as well. In the second group behind the main field, Ricardo Rico, they're going to have to really chase to pull it back. But when you saw that team of Quick-Step on the front end of the main field, it's not easy to pull yourself back to those men when they get it all firing.
I'm just looking at the faces of these boys. Pained, yes, but these are faces of men who really believe they can win this. There's the next maillot jaune, perhaps, Romain Failure. He didn't go away dreaming of yellow, but it swung that way in the last 20 kilometers when the peloton didn't close in quick enough, and now they've been disrupted. They have a very hard-working group who are now racing with different intent, of course. They're leaving behind some big names in the Tour de France for overall victory, and so they've got another reason to drive now, and that is why the race is going so quickly.
You look at that long line now, it's going to be very difficult. There are no team cars behind as well, as you noticed. There's the yellow car, the neutral service vehicle, the vehicle that looks after any of these riders now who may well have a mechanical incident. The race referees won't let anybody into that group if they do not have a gap of about the 1 minute mark. Computer telling me there with the green sign that it still looks very much as if the breakaway is going to survive, but currently they're only going to survive with around about 48 seconds of their advantage. Tour Hushovd is obviously in that group, because you can see Team Crédit Agricole working at the front end of the main field. A lot of riders from Case d'Epargne have obviously not been caught out. The yellow jersey is in this group. Just trying to look down and see if we can spot anybody else. The group of Ricardo Rico is at around about 15 seconds, and Denny Menchov is in that group at 15 seconds as well. So if this group slows down a fraction, there is every possibility that those two big names will reintegrate the front part of the race. But what other damage has been done behind? The second place in the overall is there as well in the green jersey. That's Kim Kirken. Just in front of him, looks like Oscar Freire is the man who's taken advantage of slipping into this front split. Around about 60 riders in this front split. It happened just at a moment when they went round one of the directional islands. There was a little bit of an accident halfway down the main field, and all of a sudden the hammer went down. 17 kilometers to go, 4¼ minutes. You see the hands going up for the riders there to indicate there's another little bit of danger in the road. The policeman was there too to indicate to everybody, watch out, another directional island. These riders do communicate amongst each other at times like this. Yellow jerseys comfortably there, but that is not a very big group at all. Well, it is actually. There's a group coming back there. Just waiting for the next group.
It's coming down all of the time, Paul. The computer is saying there will not be a catch, but it's going to be desperately close. Computers make mistakes. That looks like the whole of Team Barlow down there driving.
Well, just looking at this group, I think this is the second group at around about 15 seconds. Denny Menchov is in this group, and so too is Ricardo Rico. So they will be battling to try and get themselves back into contact. 4 minutes and 14 seconds at 10 miles to go. You know, it is still possible, but I think these guys are going to survive here this afternoon, because very shortly they will pick up the tailwind, and that will be an advantage for them.
Well, I think they deserve to win, quite honestly, but that's not the nature of the sport of cycling. The riders behind will chase to the end. It's going to be a desperate finish, I'll guarantee that, and whatever happens, win or lose, we'll be talking only seconds on the finishing line. These boys are dreaming. They're only 10 miles, 16 kilometers from the finish. Now, as any cyclist will tell you, the top riders will cover 10 miles in about 19 minutes. That's about how long it will take now to reach the centre of Nantes.
And I reckon the leading group of 4 will cover that 16 kilometers in around about 22 minutes, and so that will give them an advantage by around about a minute when they come down to the finish line.
But they will have the tailwind advantage
and
first.
That's the big thing that those guys have got. There's the group of Menchov and Ricardo Rico. They're still looking for about 15 seconds, and they will give their all. I'm just trying to see. I think that's the orange armada of Team Rabobank, and that will indicate that that is definitely the group of Menchov.
I thought there were red jerseys from the helicopter, but as we close in, it is the Rabobank team here. The whole team has been pulled back to get Menchov back up. Now, that's why you need a team in the Tour de France. Individuals can't do it alone. He's got 8 guys there on his squad setting the pace to try and put him back in that group alongside Valverde. 3 minutes and 50 seconds, 14.8 kilometers to go. It could be a blanket finish, this. The excitement, though, is easing because the group behind is about to merge, I think, Paul.
So it's 15 kilometers for the leading group of 4. They're inside of 10 miles to go to the finish, and I have a feeling just last time we looked back at the main field, they seem to have lost a fraction of their impetus, and that will again give the advantage to these guys. They're still riding at a fairly high tempo. They're still averaging 45, 46 kilometers an hour. You can see the big rain clouds behind them, but here at this point they're starting to pick up the advantage of the tailwind, which will push them up to the finish.
We're hearing from the race radio. It's officially 3:45, and we'd better talk seconds because it might be the difference between win and lose the stage today. The peloton under pressure. They're picking up this tailwind now. The leaders are doing their best. It's 110% from those leaders now as they continue to race towards the line. It is going to be touch and go. Will they get there? I think they might do this. We are now at 10 kilometers from the finish. The gap is still in favor of the 4 all-day escapers, but the big news, Paul, is the group containing Ricardo Rico and Denny Menchov, the 2 big names who were involved in that crash, are now 45 seconds behind Valverde's group.
Look at the faces on these riders. This is really the face of desperation. They realize they're under pressure now. Look at the trees. It is battering down on the main field of the Tour de France, battering on this group as well, as it has done for 3 days. There are a lot of tired bodies here, and as we get closer to the finish, those 4 riders in front, Phil, I think today have done absolutely enough to survive.
What's happened down there?
Looks like a quick step rider there.
Well, that was a strange pace to fall. He must have been in that group and just touched the wheel.
Well, you know, everybody, Phil, is extremely tired just now, and all it takes is a moment of misattention. Let's have a look where it happened. Just at the back there.
Touch the wheels as they ran up the inside down that shoulder there and left him lying in the road. Thankfully, everybody missed him, including the following police riders there.
Well, Menchov and Rico are still looking for 40 seconds to catch up the rest of the main contenders who are in the main field in front. I haven't seen Cadel Evans, but I'm pretty sure the way Cadel Evans has been riding, he is in that group of the Maillot Jaune. He'd ridden at the front end of the main field for the majority of the day. These 4 riders now, Phil, with 6.5 kilometers to go, have got to try and figure out, how am I going to win this stage? An opportunity like this from a breakaway does not come very often in a career, maybe once only, and if you make a mess of it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
There's Christophe Moreau, and he's in a group a little bit further back. He's encouraging a few riders to try and ride to reintegrate one of the groups in front of him with the French national champion Vaugondi, but they don't have too much to worry about because they, as a wild card selection for the Tour de France, will have got a man in the breakaway and a man who's got a very good chance of taking the overall lead tonight, Romain Felu, and there he is on the front.
Yes, he knows what's waiting for him at the finish, and he's going to be a national hero. It's like Thomas Voigtler was a few years ago when he led the race for 10 days until Lance Armstrong finally took control. But Felu, he came into this race with no intention of being in yellow, but this was a race which was always on the cards to do this. This happened, you know, back in 1966 when Lucien Aymar won the Tour de France. He broke away on stage 10 and he got a lead of over 7 minutes while Jacques Anquetil and Raymond Poulidor looked at each other. He was on the team of Anquetil, so he wouldn't chase, and then he was able to ride the mountains with the big boys. Result, Aymar won the Tour and Anquetil, I think, didn't finish.
Well, that may well have been the situation there. I don't think these guys are going to steal the lead and take it all the way round to Paris, but they are certainly going to steal the lead at the end of today.
They said that about Aymar in 1966.
Well, yeah, I don't remember that, Phil.
No, well, you wouldn't be, not as old as me.
But I tell you one thing, Romain Felu is thinking about the yellow jersey. The way he's riding at the front there, he's putting so much pressure on that move at the front that I think he's sacrificing his chance of winning the stage here this afternoon, because he reckons 2 or 3 minutes, he may well be able to hold that in the time trial, because it's not a long time trial that we normally have at the start of the Tour de France. It's only 29 kilometers in length as opposed to what is normally a time trial of 45 to 50 kilometers. So he's worked that out already.
I completely agree with you there, Paul. I think he'll just race for time and then let the other 3 fight out the stage win at 4 kilometers to go. Well, it's definitely not going to be caught now, just inside 3 minutes. Must keep at least 18 seconds of that lead. He'll have all of that. And this is the man who will be last to start in the time trial tomorrow as the new leader of the Tour de France, Stuart O'Grady, dead centre in white. He's been in all of these situations before. He crashed out of the Tour de France last year on what was the Black Wednesday for Australia, when they also lost Michael Rogers.
Funny thing, Stuart O'Grady, the last time the race came here as a bunch sprint, Stuart O'Grady was 5th on that occasion. Today he's finding himself having to work for the team, charging into Nantes, and he obviously knows the run into the finish because he knew which way to go around that corner.
Well, thank heavens they've all got round that corner, the roundabout, as they come back into everybody together again. Remember the tailwind, that's stretching that line out now at 60 k's an hour, and the boys at the back are going to be right on the nose of their saddle there with their nose touching the extension.
Well, Denis Menchov is still hovering at 30 seconds. Race Radio is telling us behind the group of Alejandro Valverde. 3 kilometers to go, Phil. That is around about 4 minutes. We will now know whether or not Romain Felu is going to be the new leader of the race. Well, I'm sure we know he's going to be the new leader of the race, but by how much?
Yes, it could be by more than they imagined back in the peloton. Totally misjudged this today. They were chasing well, it was going well. Suddenly they found they weren't catching the leaders. Then came the crash, everything went wrong. The teammates here now of Crédit Agricole driving on, trying to close the gap down. It's all too late, of course. There are plenty of green jersey points from 5th down to 25th, so Hushoff will want to go in the sprint. But forget the race for first place now. The winner's going to be Paolo Longo, Romain Felu, Samuel Dumoulin or William Frischkorn of Garmin-Chipotle. One of those 4 today will win the Tour de France stage.
Well, they certainly will. This is the group of Menchov. He's still looking for around about 30 seconds. He's got Ricardo Rico in the group with him, and they've been put seriously on the defensive here this afternoon. But at the end of the day, Romain Felu is going to take the overall lead with a 21-second advantage over the rider from Barlow World, world, Paulo Longo, but there's still the glory of winning the stage that is at hand here, Phil, this afternoon. France are looking for a stage victory. Maybe it's going to go to Samy Dumoulin at the back, because as you can see, Romain Felu, he is riding his heart out for the clock. That's all he's thinking about.
You can see he's thinking of time. The other three are thinking of victory. I think the sprint will be between Dumoulin, who is a fast finisher in the right conditions, and William Frischkorn. I think those two will be heading up first and second. Can't see Paulo Longo. He's a rather tall and lanky man. I don't see him being a pure sprinter. I've never seen him sprint in my life, so I don't know, of course. The other riders will be doing just what I'm doing, and they're setting. There goes the attack. Dumoulin's not leaving it to the sprint, and Will Frischkorn is going after him too. Paulo Longo a little bit slower. Romain Felu, he tags on the back. All he want to do is hold on there. That's a good attack by Dumoulin, Paul, but Frischkorn is up for it.
Well, Frischkorn has seen this. He knows he's got himself a chance of winning a stage in the Tour de France. These two riders here are extremely tired now. They're the ones who are first and second overall in the standings at the end of the day, but I think the legs have gone. But Romain Felu has said, I've got to go for this. He wants every possible chance of staying in contact. He doesn't want to give any time at all away, but you can see Frischkorn has caught Samy Dumoulin there, and the Frenchman Felu, I think now Phil is going to come back. Well, that was a bit of excitement, but I think it's all about to come together again.
900 metres to the finishing line, and Felu is going to go straight by them, and Frischkorn must react. This boy is going to go out on a high in yellow, and as a stage winner, Frischkorn goes again. He drills himself here, but he's taking with him Dumoulin, who may still have some legs left. Forget Longo, he's gone now, but this is a French Tour de France just at the moment, because Romain Felu won win this year. He's only a kid, by the way. He's 24 years of age. He is in yellow tonight, of that there is no doubt, but Dumoulin is coming back, as is Frischkorn, and Frischkorn is going to have to go now, because it looks as though Samuel Dumoulin, who has ridden the Tour de France on 4 occasions, is going to get his day, but Felu will not give up. He has kicked again. He's back into his slipstream. This is an awful long kilometre for these rides. Come on, William Frischkorn for Garmin Chipotle, but on the line, Frischkorn, it was the way we thought, Paul. Dumoulin gets the win, Frischkorn gets second, Felu gets third, and the Maillot Jaune, and Paulo Longo, 4 musketeers who beat the peloton today in Brittany.
I tell you what, that was an awful long way. That was probably the longest final kilometre I've ever experienced, and Samy Dumoulin used all of his experience there to go with the moves. He started the move outside of the kilometre. He was caught, he was passed, he dragged himself back in. Will Frischkorn, I think, getting himself a very good second place there. You could see the fatigue all over everybody's face there, and now we're going to see that Romain Felu will get himself the yellow jersey at the end of the day, and he certainly will not be upset about that at all. Now they've still got to sprint out, because whether or not you feel it's important, 5th place is important for the sprinters, Phil, because as far as they're concerned, they have to get points on every individual stage. There's Robbie McEwen sitting in the middle there, Thor Hushovd over on the left-hand side. He needs to get himself some points, and Robbie Hunter's not too far away either.
Well, Hunter's there, but it looks like Robert Foster's trying to come over the top here as well. No sign of Thor Hushovd, just peeping in. The green jersey of Kim Kirken in the backdrop there, but this is going to be Francisco Chiki, I think it is, on the far right. No, here comes Robbie. Well, would McEwen have won the day? Who knows now, but he's certainly going to come, as Eric, at 38 years of age, takes Robbie on right on the line. I'll wait for the photo.
This is the group of Ricardo Rico and Denny Menchoff. Menchoff there in 3rd position, coming up to the front. He's not scared of doing a little bit of work for himself, but it's the clock that's going to tell just exactly how much time he has lost today, and he will not be happy with that.
No, he's lost around about over half a minute here, Denny Menchoff, and the white jersey of Ricardo Rico, 4th in the line as he comes over it, about 2:41.
Right, let's take a look at today's stage result, and it is a result as far as the French are concerned. Samuel Dumoulin ahead of Will Frischkorn and Romain Felu in a 3-way tired man sprint, with their fellow escapee Paulo Longo Borghini 14 seconds adrift. Robbie McEwen led home the chasing bunch ahead of Eric Zabel, deprived by the breakaway of the chance to sprint for the win on his birthday. Mark Cavendish was 6th in that second sprint, 10th overall, disappointing on both counts. David Miller came in 25th in the same bunch, along with Alejandro Valverde, Cadel Evans and Carlos Sastre, all in the same time. Dennis Menchoff, though, was another 38 seconds in arrears after getting caught behind the crash, so was Ricardo Rico. Well, a home win is always good for morale on the Tour, especially since the French don't have a contender for overall victory. And after a respectful pause to let him celebrate the win with his girlfriend Magali, Matt Rendell made his move on Samuel Dumoulin.
J'arrivais pas à gagner cette année, je marchais bien, j'avais pas de réussite et putain, je sentais que j'étais bien et je me suis dit aujourd'hui c'est ton jour. C'est énorme, je suis trop content.
Well, as first wins of the year go, I should think a Tour de France stage is probably good enough to get Samuel Dumoulin off the hook for the rest of the season. Mark Cavendish has plenty of wins this season, but hasn't had a sniff so far in the Tour and wasn't much in the mood to explain why.
Mark, the chase down didn't quite work there. When did the order go out?
What for?
To chase them down.
As soon as the break got away, really, you know.
Yeah. Did you give the order? Were you talking to your teammates there?
No, the director was.
What have you learned over the past couple of days, Mark?
Nothing. Don't need to learn anything now.
Well, Team Colombia's PR department might not agree with that. No doubt Mark Cavendish's stage will come, but today's heroes were all domestic. A French stage win and third place for Romain Fellou, more than mitigated by the fact that he takes the yellow jersey as the new leader of the Tour. Here's what today's stage has done to the top of the standings. 3 of the 4 men in the break have leapfrogged the rest of the field. Fellou leads by 35 seconds from Paolo Longo Borghini, with William Frischkorn at a minute 42, just ahead of this morning's race leader, Alejandro Valverde. Behind him, the gaps stay the same to David Miller and on through to Cadel Evans and the rest of the big names, with the exceptions of Denis Menchov and Ricardo Rico, who both lost the best part of 40 seconds today. Well, at least one breakaway always succeeds in every Tour, and really the peloton, Mark Cavendish's Columbia team included, had no one to blame but themselves and their own disorganisation for miscalculating the catch today. I suppose they could, if they wanted to stretch it, point to the road blockade, and incidentally, should they ever want any advice for dealing with protesters, they could always turn to the former 5-Tour winner and current race official Bernard Hinault. The race director himself, Christian Prudhomme, handled it with diplomacy today. Pity for us that he didn't delegate it. Here's a shot of Hinault having a full and frank discussion with some protesters in 1984. Now then, it's the usual order of end of show business today. A look at the stage for tomorrow in a moment. One of the windiest openings to a Tour de France that I can remember. I suspect that the riders will be happy to get away from the coast and out of Brittany. If it's blowing tomorrow though, there'll be no sheltering in the bunch for the favourites, or anyone else for that matter. It's the time trial. Now, it's not long, just 29 kilometres, a circuit out from and back to the town of Cholet, but conditions could make it feel a lot longer, and it could well create some real time gaps among the big favourites for this year's race, or in the case of Denis Menchov, extend them. We'll have highlights of stage 4 for you tomorrow night at 7. Don't forget, you can see the whole of the stage on the red button if you're a Sky Satellite or Virgin Cable subscriber. And also don't forget to log on to itv.com/tour to send us any email questions you've got or download the podcast. Bob Roll makes his debut tonight, incidentally. All right, that's it for tonight. There'll be no breakaway tomorrow, we can guarantee that, but there will be a shakeout among the Tour favourites, as well as a Frenchman heading last down the start ramp wearing the yellow jersey. Join us at 7 o'clock tomorrow night for stage 4, the individual time trial.
Is the same for everybody. As Miller comes, it will be the best time. Miller, number 1.
Oh, Ulrich's gone down.
Ulrich is out. And he was in the lead by about 6 seconds when he fell. But Armstrong comes home. It looks like a 3rd place finish, and he knows it's nothing. He's won the Tour de France.
Hello, the Tour TARDIS touched down in Nantes this morning and we stepped out to find ourselves in 2003. Rain's not actually mentioned in the tourist board's list of local specialities, but they've kindly laid some on for us anyway. Perhaps out of nostalgia for the Centenary Tour, which pretty much concluded here when Jan Ullrich went over in the wet in the final time trial and Lance Armstrong secured his fifth and easily most exciting Tour win. Now today is another chance for Mark Cavendish. In fact, weather permitting, it's actually better than yesterday because it's a proper flat sprinter stage, and should he get it, it'll complete
mishaps from the jumping chain of the 2003 prologue to last year's exploding rims.
Two of my Mavic discs explode in the first 500 metres. Car wasn't there by our side, and then I didn't give up. I went as hard as I could to the first time check, and I'd said in my head, if I'm at a minute or under, I'll keep on going, but if I'm over a minute, I'm just shutting it down.
I don't know whether I'm just cursed or it just happens to me at the most inopportune times, because I think everybody has these mechanical problems. I just tend to have them when they're at the most visible to the world. The Tour, I have a very I keep a place in my heart for Tour de France. It's the reason I do it all. It's and I have a very close relationship with the organisers and with the ex-director Jean-Marie Leblanc and now the current director Christian Prudhomme, and I do feel that it's kind of family there. I love the race and it's something that I just love being part of, and if I can kind of be at 100%, then if I win, I don't mind, as long as I can be part of the race.
Interester, outspoken and honest. A world apart from the maverick, occasionally precious figure of 2003. David, just quickly, how much did you suffer out there today?
Oh, I don't think you don't want. There aren't words. My vocabulary isn't sufficient.
He won in the rain in Nantes, but the following year brought meltdown. His ban for EPO use left him stunned.
I think having those 2 years away from the sport kind of had changed everything for me. I came back a different rider, a different person. I'd lost a lot. I think of my physical capabilities in those 2 years. When you take 2 years away, it's going to take a big chunk out of you. And psychologically, I lost a lot of the confidence. I mean, this Tour de France was going to be exactly 2 years since I came back, so it's going to be 2 years away and 2 years back when I start this tour. So I'd like to think that I can finally kind of wipe out those 2 years away regards the loss physically. But what I lost physically, I think I've gained mentally. I mean, I'm stronger. I have an ability to work harder and more consistently than I ever had when I was younger.
A UK double, because the stage winner here in 2003 was David Miller, although that David Miller and the one on this year's race are radically different people. Since his 2-year ban for drugs, he's become the poster boy and virtual press officer for the anti-doping movement, and he's here this year as team leader and part owner of a squad that's in the vanguard of cycling's new transparency. Here's Ned Bolting on the life and tour times of David Miller.
Miller comes up to the line, he's got the target, Miller has set down the best time.
Premier leader du Tour de France, David Minard.
And now the big question is, what are you going to do to defend it?
I'm not going to do anything, my team's going to do it all. They can sit on the front and ride in the way, and I'm going to be sitting back there profiting.
So much has happened to David Miller since he first burst onto the scene that it takes some digesting.
I'm maturing into something else. I don't really know what that is yet, but I'm enjoying what I do. I love what I do.
Part of his thing is being the self-styled philosopher king of the peloton, articulate, sought after.
And I don't know. I mean, I love it more than I ever did before. So, I mean, it's kind of it was a blessing in a disguise, I think.
It's been a struggle. This is only his second tour since returning, reborn now in the white of a team he jointly owns.
We want to make a difference, and I think that's what, and we want to kind of enjoy the sport again, and kind of let the people who love the sport have something to believe in, and that's kind of the core reasons behind our team.
Last year, by his own admission, his form was uncertain. This year, he's brimming with aspiration, even if familiar misfortunes still haunt him. At the Giro, for example, he broke a chain.
What already is a very rare occurrence, a chain snapping, but having it happen at the most definitive moment in a 203-kilometre race, when the kilometre to go kite is literally touchable, was just, I don't know, kind of made me a bit angry.
Stuff like that happens to him, just another in a long line of strange, high-profile mechanical